Alright, this episode of Wavelength Theory, it will be partially scripted, and then I'm thinking I might improv at the end. Here's what I've got so far in the script. I don't really intend for this to make sense to anyone but the intended listeners. Maybe eventually someday everyone can be intended listeners. But in the meantime, those who this isn't meant for, I apologize. This will not make any sense. Those who this is intended for, it might make no sense still, but I can elaborate on how to make it make sense. Just contact me ASAP if you feel this is meant for you, I guess, and spread this to other people to test them to see if they are also adherent to these ideologies. I'm pretty sure that this subject M that I will be referring to in this text is able to detect empathetic reactivity in people. And that's an incredibly useful skill to not only me, but to the entire world, because I think I can also similarly detect it. Therefore, we could be used as stepping stones for formulating theory. Anyway, this is all rambling before I even get to the actual text. These early episodes, this is the script, by the way. These early episodes of Wavelength Theory, if I haven't made it abundantly clear previously, are meant to establish definitions. Alright, let me get the definition of definition, just for argument's sake. Definition. Definition. The definition of definition is a statement of the exact meaning of a word, especially in a dictionary, or the degree of distinctness. Yeah. The degree of distinctness in outline of an object, image, or sound, especially of an image in a photograph or on a screen. So these are all the qualia for definition. That is what I mean when I say I am trying to establish definitions. I can elaborate on that later. For instance, this is continuing the script. For instance, this last iteration, let's call it adventure number 2, was a mixture, trying to see if the rules of time still apply from adventure 1, and if so, attempting, and if so, comma, I didn't put a comma in the text, if so, attempting to apply them, as well as attempting to map other meaning. In this case, attempting to establish magnetic waves / magnets as a physical entity by mimicking the exact movements. Sorry, gotta scroll down the text. Mimicking the exact movements of another quote-unquote magnetized individual. In this case, Subject M. Subject M has been the most important keystone in these findings. Subject M continually exceeds all expectations of findings. In this leg of the experiment, I was really only aiming for a single point. Subject M has such an incredibly defined and refined predisposition to the findings that they could probably teach their own course on wavelength theory once we both define what it actually is a bit more. I think that they understand what wavelength theory is. I'm talking to you, if you're listening. I think that they understand what wavelength theory is, they just don't call it that yet, and they call it something different. And once we understand what we mean by what I'm trying to say, then we can progress and potentially change the world. Anyway, years' worth of research is being casually handed out in the span of hours, sometimes a nanosecond. This is still in reference to Subject M. Time appears to dilate proportional to a subject's breathing and heart rate. This would explain why a subject tends to try to check their heart rate when the experience first begins. They think they're having a heart attack, but it's closer to defining vibrations in a way the subject hadn't before, and truly, quote-unquote, feeling their own heart beat for the first, quote-unquote, time since roughly childbirth. Basically, the concept there is if you're able to finally actually feel what your heartbeat feels like, as opposed to only ever acknowledging what it feels like by proxy, you know that your heart beats because you can feel your pulse. But do you actually feel the muscles? Do you actually feel your heart itself beating? There are monks that have such control over their bodies that they are able to stop their own heartbeat at will because they have the ability to feel what their actual heartbeat is and control their bodies that well. Anyway, that's what the experient, from my observations, has the ability to yield. Furthered definitional understanding of one's own experiences through time. We, and by we here I mean the royal we, because I mean me, are attempting to reach relaxation. So, for basically the entirety of my life since roughly childhood, I have had a chronic inability to relax. And I think that these findings will yield to me finally being able to have a better understanding of my own body, as well as hopefully all of humanity at some point, to foster relaxation, as it were. I would like to have direct observations from multiple parties, myself included, of the altered states, the way that I express myself during altered states, the way that others express themselves during altered states, and comparisons for the biochemical indicators in their minds, how these people react, how these people have, what if they have any mental issues, quote unquote. I say issues, I mean, like, I don't want to say disabilities, but everyone has a different mental state. I don't think there is such a thing as a person who is, quote, fully sane. I think everyone just has varied levels of, well, things that we have no definition for at this point, and then things that we do have definitions for, and then definitions that are improperly applied. I think that is more or less the waking state of humankind at current. So, how do we get around this? Well, we apply additional definitions, or at least that's what the modern stance would be. You don't necessarily, apply definitions. You more or less would have to create additional language to flesh out what the definition is to mean. Currently, there are no, individual words for some things in some languages that exist in other languages. For example, temperature hot and spiciness hot are two different words in Spanish, whereas in English, you really don't, well, I guess you could just say spicy, but even that, these days, has a different definition. Excuse me while I have some coffee. I just brushed my teeth, so it tastes pretty gross, but it's fine. I need the caffeine. I've been taking to having caffeine on my days off, because oddly enough, that helps me significantly more than on the days that I'm supposed to work. But that's besides the point. Wavelength theory. I might just cut this episode short, because this is only really meant to be a part 3 anyway. I'll report back on findings later.